If I tell you that you have an ego, I'm not saying that you're this person who thinks that they're so great and is walking around all puffed up and thinking that they're God's gift to humanity. That's not it. That's not what an ego is, even though that's sort of the idea and belief and picture that a lot of us have when we talk about the ego. The truth is, we all have an ego. And I'm going to talk to you today about what the ego is and how it can really get in our way and hold us back, and how it can create all kinds of problems for ourselves, or how we think and feel about ourselves and in our relationships. Can cause a lot of problems in our relationships and can cause problems with how we're showing up in life. Whether or not we are going for what we want in life, whether or not we are letting ourselves create the life that we want, and how the ego can stop us from that. I'm going to talk about what the ego is and how to start doing ego work so that we can get the ego out of our way. Stay tuned. I think that you are going to get a lot out of this. This is powerful stuff that I'm teaching today, and it's deeper stuff that I'm teaching today, but I think that you are going to love it. If you're new here, welcome to our incredible little corner on the internet. If you haven't already, take a second, introduce yourself in the comment section below, and if you are back again, welcome. My name is Kristina, and I'm a registered clinical therapist, a researcher, a coach, and the creator of my membership community, the Shift Society, where we are taking this work to the next level. You can get information about that in the description below. There's a link to that. I help heart center go-getter men and women break through the crap that is holding them back so that they can love themselves and their lives more every day. And did I say it already? If you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel. The link or the little button is about right down there. So let's talk about the ego and what exactly it is and how it can, like I said, really get in our way and hold us back without us even really realizing it. So the ego is essentially our sense of self. What we think about ourselves, who we think we are. And you've heard me talk about this so much on my channel about our thoughts and about how our thoughts create our emotions, which drive our behaviors, which create our reality. Our thoughts are what dictate so much of our lives. And our thoughts are influenced by our ego. So again, this is what or who we think we are, based on what we've observed, what we've absorbed, what we've learned, what we've been taught, what we've been through in our lives, often within our childhood, in our formative years. That's why those are called the formative years, because a lot of our beliefs about ourselves, others, life, and the world are being formed in those formative years, because that's when the human brain is the most spongy, the most sticky, when most of that stuff kind of comes in and gets stuck in there and sort of creates this sense of self. Our ego is also about our beliefs about who we need to be in order to receive love and acceptance, in order to be good enough. And I've done other videos about this. I talked about in my last video about things that you went through in childhood that weren't so harmless, or quote unquote harmless things that you went through in childhood that weren't so harmless, and about how that shapes who you are and how you show up in your life today. And a lot of those things that you went through were creating the ego, creating these beliefs and these ideas and these thoughts about who you are, what you deserve, what you're allowed to have, who you need to be in order to get love, parts of yourself you need to reject, abandon, or suppress in order to get love and acceptance. And that is a big essence of what the ego is. So I'm going to give you some examples of this, and there are so many examples. It's basically anything, like I said before, that you were taught, that you were told, that you observed, that you absorbed, that you learn about who you are or who you are supposed to be, or what's not okay, what is okay with you as a person. Someone else's evaluation. Maybe it was your parents, maybe it was society, but it was an evaluation outside of you that was determining who you were allowed to be. And maybe it showed up when you were a child, like these messages, these subtle, if not overt messages about what good girls do, do, or what strong boys do, or who you're allowed to be. And if you're good at something, well, then that must be the thing that you're meant to be, versus what were the things that you love doing. So maybe an example of that is when you were a child and you really loved to do art. And let's say that you had a grown-up or a parent of a person that you looked up to at one point come and say to you, well, that's terrible, or that's not a very good job, or that's not what that looks like, or you shouldn't be drawing like that. Or maybe it was a mumble to someone else to say, oh, Sally really loves to draw, but have you seen her drawings? We got to maybe direct her towards sports or towards dancing or something like that, where what you loved and who you were and what was important to you and what you needed and what you thought and what you felt was somehow told or implied that it was wrong, that it wasn't okay, that you weren't allowed that. Ultimately, the ego is our learned beliefs about who we are, who we're supposed to be, who we're allowed to be, what we deserve, and who others are in relation to us. The ego is what drives the thoughts and beliefs and the behaviors that we think will get us love and acceptance. The ego is there to try to protect our vulnerable inner selves. And at a point in our childhood, often, it was there for a reason. It was there to protect us. But in a lot of ways, it is no longer serving us. And so this isn't about saying that the ego is bad and we need to kill the ego and abolish the ego and destroy the ego. That's not it. We all have an ego. We will always have an ego, but it's learning how to not get caught up in and attached to the ego. So what do? How do we start unattaching from our ego? And we do that through ego work. And I'm going to teach you 4 steps that can really help you get started on doing this ego work. And the first step is learning how to notice and observe your thoughts. And I've talked about this before in a lot of my videos. And if you're brand new to this concept, it might seem completely out there. You might be like, what is she talking about? What do you mean observe my thoughts? Well, if that is the case, then to get you started, I have a 10-minute guided mindfulness exercise that I'm going to put the link in the description below. It's an audio exercise that's going to teach your brain how to start just observing your thoughts and unattaching from thoughts and not getting so caught up in overthinking and overstressing and overworrying and getting just like in the thought spiral from letting those thoughts just sort of come in and take over. So you can grab that if this is a new concept for you. But for those of you who have been here for a while, you know more of what I'm talking about here. And so this is the work, is learning to observe and notice our thoughts. What is my brain thinking right now? What is the reaction that my brain is having in this moment? What's my perception? What's my evaluation? What's my perspective on what's going on now within myself, with life, with others, with the world? That is what ego work starts with, is learning how to just notice our thoughts, our reactions to things that we are experiencing in our lives. The next one is to name the ego when it shows up. And this is a really helpful tool, especially when we're feeling emotionally triggered. Instead of getting all caught up in our thoughts and being like, I'm such a terrible person, or they're such a terrible person, or this shouldn't happen, or this isn't, this is unacceptable, and how dare they do that, and what's wrong with me, or whatever those stories are that we have when we're feeling emotionally triggered. And to just learn to take a step back and be able to say, oh, this is my ego. This is my ego trying to protect my vulnerable self. This is what my ego is trying to tell me in this moment. That's why I'm having this emotional trigger. That's why I am reacting, is because my ego is being awakened in this moment. And so just learning how to observe that and notice what my ego is telling me. What is my ego trying to get me to believe right now? Is it trying to get me to believe that I'm not good enough? Is it trying to get me to believe that I don't have what it takes? Maybe it's trying to get me to believe that other people are better than me. Maybe it's trying to get me to believe that I don't deserve this. Maybe it's trying to even get me to believe that everyone else is terrible and life is so unfair. And why do all these things happen to me all the time? It's just learning to take a step back and observe what my ego is trying to get me to believe. And how you know it's the ego that's showing up, more often than not, if you feel terrible, if your thoughts that are going through your mind are leading you to feel small and helpless and hopeless and terrible, then chances are that is the ego that is coming in and telling you a whole bunch of things that are not helpful, healthy, serving, or true. So it's learning how to just name it. This is an ego thought. The next one is to just notice how I feel, like I said just now. How do I feel when I believe these thoughts? And so when I tell myself this story, when I have this thought about this situation, this is how I feel. And then based on that feeling, this is how I typically react. And if neither of those things are healthy or helpful or getting you to and where you want in your life, then it's time to take a step back and check the ego. It's time to take a step back and recognize where this is an ego response when it's not helpful, where this is an ego response, and being able to then go on to step 4 and ask ourselves, if I wasn't believing these things that the ego was telling me right now, if I wasn't believing these stories, these thoughts, this perspective, and even if I've believed it for a long time and I think that it's true, even though that's just a repetition of the same belief or the same thought, and then it turns into a belief and we believe that it's true just because we've thought it for a long time. But what if I wasn't to believe this? What if I didn't have a story that ended with me being a loser or a reject or unlovable or not good enough or a failure or whatever that is that it's been going through my head for way too long? What if I wasn't believing these ego-derived thoughts right now? What would I like to think? What if these things were not true about me? Just what if? Maybe I can't totally get on board and believe that right now, depending on where you're at. Maybe you're not ready to fully believe, but just for argument's sake. Just for fun. What would it be like if I thought this instead? What's another way of looking at it that wouldn't leave me feeling terrible? Again, this isn't about fighting or killing the ego. This is about recognizing it. This is about separating ourselves from it so that we can be the conscious being, so that we can be the person who is directing our lives instead of the ego directing our lives. We can be checking in and connecting and bringing out our authentic self and not letting the ego flare up and throw us off and knock us down and keep us held back and stuck in the cycle. And you know what I'm talking about when I say that. For those of you who are stuck in that cycle, which I get sometimes and I have been a lot in the past, but that is the work. The work is not about never having a self-defeating thought, never thinking a quote unquote negative thought, or it's not about never getting triggered. It's not about acting perfectly and feeling perfectly and thinking perfectly all the time, but it's about taking a step back and observing our minds, observing the ego and when it shows up and tries to get us to believe lies, things that are not true, healthy, helpful, and serving, and knowing that this doesn't happen overnight. And also watching the ego trying to tell you, okay, now you understand this. Now everything should be fine. You shouldn't ever get caught up in the ego ever again. You shouldn't ever get really triggered again. You shouldn't ever, beat yourself up again. You shouldn't ever criticize yourself again, because now you know that's just the ego. So if you don't go forward perfectly from here and never struggle with this again, then, oh, it's because there's something wrong with you. There's really just something wrong with you, and there's nothing that can be done. You're just broken or flawed or not good enough. Those are ego thoughts. And so acknowledging and understanding that this takes work. This is a process. It doesn't happen after a 10 or 15 minute talk and a couple tries. This is the work that we're doing in the Shift Society. This is the deeper ongoing work that we are doing to dismantle these unserving, unhelpful, unproductive, unhealthy thoughts, beliefs, and ideas that keep us stuck and held back. And it's about creating and connecting with and believing ones that are. It's about unlearning the unhelpful and relearning the helpful. So if this is work that you want to do, if you want support along the way, if you want to be in a community of incredible people doing this work, if you want the tools to do this work, then come and join us in the Shift Society. The link to that is below. And again, like I said, with that 10-minute guided mindfulness exercise, that's going to be really helpful for you as well. So make sure that you grab that. That one is free. If you thought this was helpful, if you thought more people need to understand about the ego and how that's not our authentic self, so that we can stop judging and criticizing and berating ourselves and understanding that's not ourselves. These are learned beliefs. These are learned ideas. These are learned perspectives. And we can unlearn them. Then please do share this out with them and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so that we can stay connected. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. As always, leave your comments in the comments section below. And until next time, take good care.